Chapter 6. A Different Life. Clara Thorne stood at the window of her office, watching the snow fall over the hospital courtyard. The flakes drifted down in lazy spirals, catching the pale winter light, settling on the bare branches of the oak tree that had stood in that spot for 80 years. She had watched that tree through every season for nearly 2 decades. She had watched it bloom in spring, flourish in summer, shed its leaves in autumn, and stand skeletal against the winter sky. She had watched it survive storms and droughts and the relentless passage of time. She understood survival and endurance and the fierce, stubborn will to keep going when everything inside you wanted to stop. The phone on her desk buzzed. Her nurse, Marianne, was calling from the front desk. "Dr. Thorne? The Martinez family is here. They're in room 412. "Thank you, Marianne. I'll be right there." She walked down the corridor, her heels clicking against the linoleum. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair, and the faint, lingering trace of hope. She had learned to recognize that smell. She had learned to recognize it in all its variations. The sharp, acrid smell of fear, the sweet, cloying smell of denial, the clean, sterile smell of acceptance. She had learned to recognize them all, because she had smelled them all. She had smelled them in the rooms of dying children, in the waiting rooms of anxious parents, and in the corridors where nurses walked with their heads down and their shoulders hunched. She had smelled them all, and she had learned to breathe through them. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. She paused outside the door, took a breath, and composed her face into the mask of calm competence that her patients needed to see. She knocked. "Come in," a voice said. A woman's voice, tired, hopeful, terrified. Clara opened the door. The room was small, sterile. The walls were painted a pale, soothing blue that was meant to be calming and was, in fact, the opposite. It was the color of institutional care, the color of waiting, the color of the spaces between hope and despair. In the bed lay a girl. She was 8 years old, with dark hair and dark eyes and skin the color of honey. Her name was Sophia Martinez. She had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 6 months ago. She had been through 3 rounds of chemotherapy and had lost her hair and her appetite and the bright, unself-conscious joy that had once radiated from her small body. But she had not lost her will to live. That, Clara had discovered, was the one thing that leukemia could not take. The will to live. The stubborn, irrational, beautiful will to live. "Dr. Thorne," Sophia said. Her voice was thin, reedy, but there was a spark in her eyes. A spark that had not been extinguished. A spark that refused to die. "Hello, Sophia," Clara said. "How are you feeling today?" Sophia shrugged. Her small shoulders rose and fell beneath the thin hospital gown. "Okay, I guess. Tired. My head hurts a little." Clara nodded. She walked to the bed. She took Sophia's hand. The girl's fingers were cold, fragile, bird-like. She could feel the bones beneath the skin. "I'm sorry about the headache," Clara said. "We can give you something for that. At first, I want to check your vital. Is that okay?" Sophia nodded. Clara took her blood pressure, her pulse, her temperature. She listened to her heart and lungs, and examined her lymph nodes with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. But she did it with care, with gentleness, with the kind of attention that made her patients feel seen. Because she had learned in her years of practice that the most important thing she could offer was not a cure. It was not a treatment. It was not a clinical solution to a clinical problem. It was presence. It was the simple, radical act of being there. Sophia's mother, Elena, sat in the corner of the room. She was a small woman with dark circles under her eyes and a face that had been worn thin by worry. She had been sitting in that same chair for 6 months. She had watched her daughter waste away. She had watched her daughter suffer. She had watched her daughter fight. And she had never left her side. "How is she doing?" Elena asked. Her voice was trembling. Her hands were trembling. Everything about her was trembling. Clara looked at her. She looked at the fear and the hope in her eyes. and the desperate, clinging love that radiated from her small, exhausted body. "She's doing well," Clara said. "The latest round of chemotherapy is working. The cancer is retreating. It's slow, it's painful, but it's working." Elena's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had heard this before. She had heard it. And she had believed it. And she had been disappointed. But she heard it now. And she believed it now. And she allowed herself to hope. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered. "Thank you, Dr. Thorne. Thank you for everything." Clara nodded. She squeezed Sophia's hand. She turned to leave. But at the door, she paused. She looked back at the room. She looked at the mother and the daughter, clinging to each other, clinging to hope, clinging to the fragile thread of life that connected them to the world. She looked at them, and she thought about her brother, and his letters, and his conviction that life was suffering, that the only ethical choice was to refrain from creating new life. She looked at Elena and Sophia, and she thought about all the reasons her brother was wrong. She walked back to her office. She sat down at her desk. She stared at the wall. The snow was still falling. The oak tree was still standing. The world was still turning. She thought about Sophia and Eleanor and the love that bound them together. The fierce, desperate, beautiful love that made all the suffering bearable. And then she thought about her brother. She had read his letters. She had read them all. She had read them, and she had cried and raged and felt sorry for him and angry at him. She had read them, and she had tried to understand. But she did not understand. She did not understand how a man could spend his entire life of arguing that life was suffering, and building walls, and pushing away everyone who had ever tried to love him. She did not understand how a man could be so wrong about everything. She opened her laptop. She opened the folder where she kept her brother's letters. She read them again. "Dear Clara," the first one began, "I am writing to you because I want you to understand. I want you to understand why I have made the choices I have made." She did not understand her brother. She had never understood her brother. She had spent her entire life trying to understand him, and she had failed. But she loved him. She loved him because he was her brother, because he was part of her, because despite everything, despite the years of silence and the arguments and the pain, she could not stop loving him. She sat at her desk, staring at the screen, and she felt the weight of it all. The weight of the love, the weight of the anger, the weight of the grief. She felt the weight, and she began to type. "Dear Elias," she wrote, "I have read your letters, all of them, several times, and I have tried to understand, and I have failed." She paused. She thought about what to say next. She thought about all the things she had not said, all the things she was still too afraid to say. "I don't understand you. I have never understood you. I have spent my entire life trying to understand you, and I have failed. I don't understand how you can look at the world and see only suffering, how you can look at love and see only loss, how you can look at life and see only death. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand, that I'm trying to forgive you, that I'm trying to love you, even when I don't understand you." The days passed. She did not hear from Elias. She did not expect to. He was dying. He was busy. He was trying to say all the things he had never said. She wrote to him again. She told him about Sophia, about the hospital, about the work that gave her life meaning. She told him about the joy she found in her work, in her children, in her husband, the joy she found in the simple, beautiful, impossible act of living. She told him about the joy, and she did not apologize for it. She did not explain it. She did not justify it. She simply told him. and she let him decide what to do with it. His reply came a week later. "Dear Clara," he wrote, "I don't understand how you can see the world the way you do. I don't understand how you can look at suffering and see joy, how you can look at death and see life, how you can look at the pain and see meaning." She paused. She thought about what he had written, about the gap between them, the vast, unbridgeable gap between his philosophy and her experience. "But I want you to know that I'm trying. I want you to know that I'm trying to understand, that I'm trying to see the world the way you do, and that I'm trying to believe in the joy." She wrote back to him. "Dear Elias," she wrote, "I want you to come and visit me in Chicago, to see my life, to meet my children. I want you to see the hospital and the work that I do. I want you to see the joy." She thought about what she was asking. She was asking him to leave his apartment, to leave his study, to leave the walls he had spent his life building. She was asking him to come into her world. "I know you are dying. I know you are sick. I know you are afraid. But I want you to come. I want you to see. I want you to understand. I want you to believe." She hit send. The reply came the next morning. "Dear Clara," he wrote, "I will come." He was coming to see the joy. He was coming. He was coming, and she would show him. She would show him everything. The joy, the love, the meaning. She would show him that he was wrong. The days passed. She prepared for his visit. She cleaned the house. She bought groceries. She told her children that their uncle was coming to visit. "They have an uncle?" her youngest asked. His name was Samuel. He was 6 years old. He had his mother's eyes and his father's smile, and a curiosity that could not be satisfied. "Yes," Clara said, "you have an uncle. His name is Elias. He's my brother. He's been away, but he's coming to visit, and he wants to meet you." Samuel looked at her. His eyes were wide. His face was full of questions. "Is he nice?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "He's nice. He's just complicated." Samuel nodded. He accepted this. He was 6 years old. He accepted everything. Clara watched him run off to play. She watched his small body disappear around the corner. She watched him go, and she felt something tighten in her chest. She had spent her entire life trying to protect her children from suffering, to give them a happy childhood, to build a world where they would not have to experience the pain and loss that had marked her own childhood. She had succeeded in her own way. She had given them love. She had given them stability. She had given them the foundation they would need to navigate the world. But she had not protected them from everything. She had not protected them from the knowledge that the world was cruel, that people died, that life was suffering. She had not protected them from the truth. She had given them the truth, and she had given them the tools to face it. She had given them the joy, too. She had given them the joy, and she had taught them that the joy was worth the price. She had taught them that life was worth living, and that love was worth the loss, and that meaning was real. She had taught them everything that her brother had denied. He arrived on a Thursday. She had not hugged him in 3 years. She saw him before he saw her. He was walking slowly, leaning on a cane. He was thinner than she remembered. His face was gaunt. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, a man who was already half dead. But he was still walking, still moving. He was still alive. She walked toward him, toward her brother, toward the man who had spent his life denying everything she believed. She walked toward him and she opened her arms. "Elias," she said. He looked at her. His eyes were hollow. His face was gaunt. His body was failing. But he smiled. He smiled, and he opened his arms. "Clara," he said. She hugged him. She held him tight. She felt his bones beneath his skin and the trembling of his body, and the weight of everything he had carried. She hugged him, and she did not let go. She drove him to her house. She showed him her home and her children and her husband. She showed him her life. She showed him the joy. He looked at everything, and he said nothing. That night, after the children had gone to bed, they sat in the living room. The fire crackled in the fireplace. The snow fell outside the window. The house was quiet. "Elias," Clara said, "I want you to come with me tomorrow. I want you to see the hospital and the work that I do, and I want you to see Sophia." She drove him to the hospital the next morning. She walked him through the corridors. She showed him the rooms, the beds, the machines, the nurses, the patients, and the parents. She showed him the suffering. She introduced him to Sophia. She watched him take her hand and look into her eyes, and he watched him see the spark that refused to die. When they left the room, she led him to the window at the end of the corridor. She pointed to the courtyard, where the snow was still falling, where the oak tree was still standing. "Elias," she said, "I want you to see something. I want you to see what I see. I want you to see the joy." He looked at her. His eyes were hollow, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like understanding. "I see it," he said. "I see it." She looked at him, at her brother, the man who had spent his life denying everything she believed. And she saw something shift in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "Elias," she said, "what do you see?" He looked at her. His eyes were wet. His face was trembling. "I see the joy," he said. "I see the joy. And I was wrong. I was wrong about everything." She hugged him. She held him tight. She felt his bones beneath his skin. She felt the trembling of his body. She felt the weight of everything he had carried. She hugged him, and she did not let go. They stood at the window for a long time. They watched the snow fall. They watched the oak tree stand. They watched the world turn. They stood together, brother and sister, and they did not say anything. They did not need to. They had found each other again. They had found each other, and that was enough.